Alrighty guys, welcome back to the Crux build. Today we're going to be walking you through what we picked for drivetrain. So we're going to be going through the install of our red levers and our GX derailleur. Why we chose red. Red is brand new. It was probably the thing we splurged for most on the budget.
This is the brand new red. Red's not new, but this is the new 13-speed red that we're going to be pairing with a 12-speed mountain drivetrain.
The shifters is the new 13-speed, and these are also the same shifters that they use on the new 12-speed red. That is the 2x-road. The 13 is the gravel-specific drivetrain. We opted not to go with that one. For this one, we went with the GX transmission derailleur. This one is not 13, it is a 12. The reason we did this is because we wanted to keep it within a certain budget. We'll probably talk about that at the end. We're not going to get into that too much in this video. Why we did that. Thomas is a mountain bike guy. He's coming off of an enduro, now on a stump jumper, then on a pivotless SL, full cross country. Now we're in gravel. So we're kind of just ratcheting further and further down. One day, I'm hoping he gets on a road bike. Not gonna hold my breath on that one, but we're sticking with more of a mountain bike feel as far as drivetrain goes. Now on these guys, when you're installing, you do have to cut some things. There is gonna be fluid, expect to bleed. Try and cut as close to the shifter as possible. That way you have as much cable left as possible when you're running it.
And that's because this frame is internally routed front and rear. So the front's gonna run through the fork. It is a carbon fork, and then the rest of the frame is a Crux DSW. So it's all aluminum with the Delucio Smart Weld in here. So if you haven't looked up the Delucio Smart Weld, we'll put some stuff in the description. It's a really cool way that Specialized are welding their frames together. It's extremely strong and it makes the bike even lighter for being an aluminum bike.
As well, I wanna say, while you're running these, charge your batteries. So just remember that. It's gonna make setup way easier. So as you can see, probably red, yep, red. So charge the batteries before you get into everything. It'll be ready when that's time.
When setting up your brakes, it's a great idea to take your pads out as well. You just want to make sure that you don't have any opportunity to get dot fluid or mineral oil, whatever your brakes run on. You don't want to get that on your pads or your rotors. It's just going to be a bad day. So we recommend taking your pads out before you go ahead and get everything installed. Right now, Jake is connecting a cable guide to a routing cable to the front brake because this is not routed inside. It's just a loose carbon hole basically. So it can be a little hard to make sure that the cable goes in the entrance hole and out the exit. So we ran a cable guide through and he's just threading it on and then he's gonna pull it through the frame.
Thanks to a little movie magic, this is first try. It definitely didn't take us a few attempts off camera. Look at that, no problem. Always remember, put Loctite on our hardware. It is titanium.
Just like for the fork, we're gonna run the routing tool through the frame here because it does have to make quite a few bends as it comes through the chainstay, under the bottom bracket, and then up through the down tube here. So this routing tool has oh, Jake took it from me. There's a threaded end on one end. It's gonna thread into the brake line, and then the other end has just a magnet on it. So what you can do is you can feed the magnetic end through the frame using a magnet, chasing along the outside of the frame, plus a few other techniques to be able to get the routing tool through the frame in the path that you need it to take. And then once you get it through, all you need to do is thread your cable on to the threaded end and pull it straight through. And it saves a lot of time and headache.
Just to explain some of the troubles I'm having on this new frame, they're not big issues. They're easy to sort out once you get the hang of it, but there's a couple lips right on the inside. You're not gonna be able to see them with the camera, but right where this arm meets the bottom bracket shell, there is a couple aluminum lips on the inside that you are gonna have to put the piece of metal in there through until the magnet grabs it, bring it through, and then put the piece of metal through the bottom and then grab the magnet that way, pull it out, push it back up.
And that's part of the Delusio Smart Weld. These flanges aren't just butted up against the whatever they're welded to. They actually have a lip inside of what they're welded onto to further strengthen that bond.
If I've done this right, should be about there. Be real gentle. Aha.
You just need to connect the line, and that will easily just pull right through in the path that we need it to take. There is a bit of a guard in here inside the bottom bracket, you can see, and it needs to go under that path there. So it's not just a straightforward path that the cable needs to go, which is where this comes in handy, because it can be pretty difficult getting your brake line to flow through the frame the way that it needs to. This is that threaded connection we were talking about. So now that it's threaded on, we can just pull the guide all the way through.
Don't be too rough on this one. It's gonna get caught, just finagle it a little bit. Don't pull hard. You might pull through where it's connected, and that becomes a problem.
So on the Crux DSW, as well as the standard Crux and almost all specialized road bikes, just basically aside from the Diverge, this is gonna use 32mm bolts securing the rear brake on. And the way that you figure out the size is actually based off of this dimension here, how thick the chainstay is. On carbon bikes, it's obviously going to go through the actual chainstay and not be like a welded on brake boss. But on this bike, it is 32mm, just like the standard Crux, just like all the SL8s, SL7, Roubaix. It's pretty much just the Diverge. The Diverge is a 37mm out of the specialized lineup that uses a different bolt. But we're just getting this guy installed now. These silver red brakes with the copper betterables is a sweet look.
I always tell our customers, go for a little bit of contrast, because silver on silver, you're not gonna know this. Silver on black, you're not gonna know this, but silver with a copper, wow, chef's kiss. So we were just discussing this off camera, but it looks like with the way they position the hoods, your fastening bolt right here is at a much better angle. That was always a big issue, in my opinion, with putting on the SRAM hoods, is with just a really tight angle, getting your wrench around this rubber bit right here. This is much easier. Now, what we're doing right now is sliding the churro down over the cable. I was once a rookie at one point, and I'm gonna admit to being a rookie on some other things later this video. But I once built a bike without doing this churro, thinking it was not a big deal. It is a very loud deal.
This is the deal that he's talking about. You'll get that noise when you're riding. The churro is essentially just a squishy foam sleeve for your brake line, and you just want to feed it down the frame all the way down, and that's going to stop you from getting that cable rattle when you're off-road. On carbon bikes, you typically don't have to worry about this because they're going to have a full cable sleeve inside the frame. It'll be routed all the way through. But commonly on aluminum bikes and some carbon bikes, you'll have this big window here. And when you have that style, you definitely need to get these brake churros or these cable churros on. If you have shifter cables as well, luckily we only have just one brake line going through the frame. Everything else is wireless, his dropper and his drivetrain. But if you have multiple cables, they all need a churro as well, or else they will make a lot of noise when they hit each other, as well as hitting the side of the frame.
So they give you a few options for that final little door fitting up front. One for 2 cables, one just to cover the hole, and then one for a single brake cable. We're using the one for a single brake cable. Don't use this 2 cable door. That'll cause a lot of dust to get inside the frame. That's still gonna happen either way, but it will happen a lot less. And then we're gonna use that cover on the other side because we are running axis. It's a bit of an odd angle on this little door, so whatever you do, make sure you don't cross thread. So when sizing up the cables, I happen to know that these bars will probably change at some point. This is his first gravel bike. I expect him to experiment a little, so I'm gonna run too much cable. It's fine, not an issue. Make sure the bars can turn all the way. I like to tape it in place before I cut it. When you go to cut it, make sure you tuck that cable all the way up in, and then cut it like a 1/2 inch past
the entrance to the brake line there. And you want to make sure you're tucking it into the corner, because when you wrap the bar, the cable is going to be tucked all the way up in the corner like that. But you want to make sure that you leave this a tad long, so that when you put it inside, because it's going to go inside the lever here, about that far, once you get the barb and olive on. So you want to make sure that you leave a little extra so that it doesn't pull the cable down that way. After cutting it, it's a nice pro tip to jam a pick down inside the brake line to make sure the line didn't collapse at all. It makes getting the barb and olive on a little bit easier. So on SRAM brakes, the barb and olive thread into each other, and then the barb threads into the brake line. And the point of the barb is so that when you tighten the nut onto the olive and it compresses onto the brake line so that it can't pull out, it's so that the barb stops the line from collapsing on itself, so that it can actually still flow fluid in and out. This is what we call a compression fitting. So you actually squeeze that red olive till it crunches onto the outside of the lever. This is just an 8mm open end box wrench. And then a good thing to do if you're not sure how tight to go here, SRAM does have on their website, they will have torque values. Usually they're printed on the lever themselves as well. But if you're not sure, leave one side connected from the factory, and then count how many threads are sticking out and match the amount of threads sticking out from one side to the other. Jake and I have done this quite a few times where we kind of can just do this, this one by hand. We're pretty used to it. All right, Jake's fitting the brakes bled right now. By the end of the video, we should have a complete rolling chassis, drivetrain, and brakes. He's got the brakes, the brake lines wrapped up with electrical tape. This is actually a little more than I would typically use. But this is how he usually wraps his bars. That way the tape just lays down a little bit cleaner. I'll typically just do one strip, one strip, one strip here up in the corner to make sure that the cable sits up pretty flush in there. But either way, there's multiple ways to skin a cat, so that works just as well. What's up, guys? I'm gonna take over for the derailleur install here. So again, we're running the GX transmission with these SRAM red clickers. So first step we're gonna do is if you have a UDH hanger in already, you're gonna take that out. And then what you need to do is take this main bolt out and get to the red sleeve. The sleeve comes in from the drive side, and then you're going to slide the derailleur up and in. Now leave this loose. What you need to do is you need to go to SRAM's website and you need to go to their setup guide, and you need to find for your specific bike your specific setup instructions. So with this derailleur and this bike, we need to set up the setup key into position A, which I believe it comes in already, but there's a little mark back here, Jake, if you want to show it. There's a little tab on the end of this piece of plastic, and then there's a little mark there, and you need to take this guy out and make this mark line up with either A or B, depending on how SRAM told you to set this up. Then this will also give you your chain length as well. So we need to cut our chain to 120 links. This is 126 in the box, and they even have a diagram on the outside to help you know where to cut for 120. So what we're just gonna do is lay the end down on this box and mark 120 there and cut the chain. You wanna leave this just a little bit loose. And now we're gonna cut our chain, because that is the next step. Get this guy unboxed. We went with the black PVD chain on this build. It's gonna be a nice contrast. Silver would have been cool, but the black is a really nice touch. One of my favorite things about the now T-type, but what used to be called flat top from SRAM, is they machine the top of the profile, or not machine, but when the links are made, the top of the profile, when the chain is stretched straight, is completely flat. I think it's a really cool look. I'm a little bummed that it is not compatible with older levels of the drivetrain. You have to have either a road or now T-type to be able to run a flat top chain. But what we're gonna do is use the handy dandy guide they gave us on this box. So again, they have a diagram laid out here. I'm just gonna line this up next to it, and I know to cut right there for 120 links, which is what SRAM's website said is what we're going to need for this setup. So take our chain guide here, our chain cutter, turn that down, make sure it's lined up on the pin. Don't want to press anything sideways. And now we are ready to install the chain on our bike. So with SRAM chains, they are the same inside outside. Oh. Well, Jake just pointed off camera. We still have yet to put the cranks on. So we cannot install the derailleur because of the setup process without having cranks and a chainring on the bike. Got a little ahead of ourselves here, so we're actually gonna take a step back and we're gonna go throw these sweet 5-dev cranks and the 5-dev chainring on the bike and the bottom bracket before we can finish the install of this derailleur. All right, so we gotta throw the bottom bracket into this bike before we can finish the drivetrain. So we're gonna be using just a standard SRAM dub bottom bracket. These things are great. They're fairly inexpensive. They do a great job. There are some crazy ones you can get that are like ceramic bearings and that sort of thing, but honestly, for the most part on all my builds, I just use this. You save a ton of money and it's still pretty bomb-proof. It is going to be labeled left and right, and you do have to be careful because left and right is different. You'll have an engraving right there. Left and right is going to be different threading. They both thread backwards to thread in. That's the way I always remember it, is you thread backwards onto the bike and forwards to remove. We're just going to toss a little bit of grease onto the threads here. Just gonna grease up the threads in the frame. That's plenty. And then another important thing to note is to make sure that you keep the sleeve inside the bottom bracket. Everything can be installed and ran without this sleeve in the middle, but really this sleeve's important because it keeps dust off of your crank, off the crank spindle, because otherwise dirt's gonna be getting in from your cable ports and all over the place, and it's gonna be getting itself onto your crank spindle. And what that'll do is work a lot of dirt into your bearings and also cause some wear on your spindle, which can cause play in the future. So it's a good idea to make sure you keep this bottom bracket sleeve on the bike. And we're just gonna tighten this down. These get tightened to 50 Newton meters. So we'll pop the torque wrench out. And again, both spin towards the rear of the bike. All right, cranking these guys down to 50 Newton meters. I like to support the frame and kind of pull it up into my armpit, just so I'm not putting extra stress here. When I'm torquing the frame, it'll do that in the stand. And then remember to flip your torque wrench around when you're doing the other side. And there we go. We have the bottom bracket torqued into the bike. Our next step here is going to be installing this 5-dev chainring onto these 5-dev titanium cranks for the road bike that they sent us. So this is an 8-bolt design. If you weren't using a 5-dev chainring, you would also be able to use a standard 8-bolt SRAM road chainring, something like their power meter ring or anything else. But they sent us this sweet aero disc. So this is going to be a sweet look on this bike. All right, so we're getting ready to throw the cranks on. So we have the chainring installed, the 8-bolt chainring installed on these tie cranks. Cool thing is 5-dev supplied us with 2 different spindle lengths. We actually have not measured yet. So we're thinking the silver one, but we're gonna throw it in, and if this isn't lining up, we'll show you how to check. If this isn't lining up, then we'll take it back out and we'll swap spindle lengths to the longer one. But for now, we're pretty sure we're gonna be using this one. This is the non-drive side crank arm. It has the expander already installed, pre-installed. This is gonna give you your preload to take all the rest of the slop out of the system. So first we're going to install the crank spindle onto the left arm. Bonus points if you line the logo up while you do this.
What do you mean by logo?
There is a small engraving right here, and I just line that up with the line of the crank arm. It really means nothing, but it is nice sometimes to take every level of detail into account. Alrighty, now what we're gonna do is apply a fairly liberal amount of grease to this bottom bracket and send this guy through. I have a feeling this is gonna come back out a couple times just to get the spacing correct. And what we're gonna be measuring when we're doing this spacing is we're gonna be checking to see how far each crank arm comes to the chainstays here. So we want that to be even or as absolutely close as we can get it, because that's gonna mean that the cranks are actually centered on the pipe. So let's give this guy a shot. Get that in there. And I can already tell we're probably gonna need a spacer on this side because that's about what we're going for. But let's just see. I already know the drive side's gonna need a fairly large spacer. So I'm just gonna throw that one on. We'll start to tighten down these cranks here and we'll take a measurement. Actually, that might be pretty much exactly what we're after. I'll get some calipers out. Looks like we're spaced out on this side a little bit further than the other side. But that means we definitely picked the correct spindle length because this is completely tightening up. But we may need to do a small tweak here. All right, so real quick, we're gonna give a slightly different configuration a shot just to see if it's gonna be a little bit better. We're gonna throw a 2.5 millimeter spacer on the non-drive side and then keeping the 5.5 on the drive side. So, and the reason for that is the expander plug, the compression adjustment on the non-drive side was almost bottomed out. So I want to see if we can take up some of that with this actual spacer rather than relying on the expander. So again, we're going to tighten this all the way up. And check to see. Yes, we can still add preload with the preload screw here, or the preload adjustment here on the side, which means that we have this fully compressed inside of the spindle is fully seated into both sides of the crank arms. And then we are just adding that final bit of compression using this compression slider here. And that is so that the cranks don't slide side to side in the bottom bracket, but also you know that you're not overly compressing your bottom bracket. If you weren't able to turn this spindle here, or the compression adjustment here, you possibly crushed your bearings because you tightened the crank onto your bearings rather than just having them snug in there. So now all we need to do is tighten this bolt on the end of the preload adjustment so that it can't spin back and forth. Important note here is don't go too tight on these. You barely need to tighten them, just enough that they don't spin on their own. And that is plenty. Perfect. So now we have these cranks installed. All right, after that short detour, now we are ready to put the chain on and install the rest of the drivetrain. So as I was saying before, we remembered that we didn't have the cranks in. SRAM chains are, you can put them on either way. Do make sure that you get the flat top, facing up, or the rounded ends going onto the actual chain, onto the actual cogs, because that can cause a lot of problems. But you don't have to worry about inside outside with SRAM chains. All you would need to worry about that with is some Shimano chains are not ambidextrous, but the easiest way to solve that issue is always make sure the logo is facing you. If you can read the letters on the outside of the chain links, then you have your chain facing the correct way. So now again, following the instructions for setup, for this specific bike, we were told to put the chain on the 7th cog. So we counted up, we're on the 7th cog here. And you do need to put your derailleur into setup mode. And that is different than the full brake. What you need to do is go just a half press, push the brake in, and this is setup mode here. And now I'm gonna sneak over here and grab the master links. These are curved master links. So make sure that the curve is going to follow the curve of your cassette or your chain, because you can put them in upside down. They do also have an arrow for direction of travel, so that can help as well. But I always just remember to get the curve correct. And then we have master link pliers, but you can always roll these up to the top right here, grab the wheel and push down on the brake. But for ease here, I'm gonna pop that in with some master link pliers. And now all that's needs to be done is, now that we're in the 7th cog in the setup and the chain is installed, we're going to pull this back, and there is a small little slit here. You want to make sure that this silver piece comes back with it. And you're just gonna pull back till the chain is under tension, and then tighten up your derailleur here. And the torque spec on this guy is gonna be 35 Newton meters. So we'll pop that into our torque wrench. So tighten this guy up, and I like to brace the frame again. Tighten this guy up to 35 Newton meters. There we go. And now you can press this forward and take the brake off, which sometimes it automatically comes off once you tighten this. That's pretty normal. And we are all set. So we can actually shift through all of our gears. We may need to do some small micro adjusting. And the way that I'm gonna check that, this one actually looks really good, is I'm gonna look at the gap between the chain and the next cog here. And if it looks like it's almost touching, or I can't see a gap, and I hear, if I run this through and I hear noise or clicking inside the drivetrain, I'll probably micro adjust that down, which there's going to be a little button on the inside of your shifter up here at the front. You're gonna hold that in and shift either down, or on the other side you would shift up. And what that's gonna do is trim your derailleur. I believe it's a 1/2 millimeter, and it'll trim your derailleur either down or up to make sure that your chain is sitting on the center of that cog. But this actually appears to be set up, I mean, shout out to transmission, it's been pretty sweet, but it appears to be set up flawlessly right out of the get-go, even with us messing with this derailleur outside of the box for a while. So looks like we are ready to go. We are quite close to finishing up this build. I think this is a great place to wrap up this video. So if you want to come back and check out the next video that we do for this bike, that's going to be getting all of the rest of this thing wrapped up. So we'll throw the seat in, we'll get the seat on, we'll get Thomas's fit dialed in, and we'll get the bars wrapped, and then we'll do a little overview of everything, putting all the finishing touches on the bike. So thank you for watching this video. Make sure to come back for the next one when it comes out. And if you haven't seen the previous video where we get this whole bike set up with ride wrap and kind of go over the thought of the build and all the products that we're running on it, definitely go back and watch that one. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.